Yeah, my name is Sahba, and Javed is my eldest brother, and we were a family of my parents, of course, and 6 brothers and sisters. I'm the 5th in the row. We lost 2 brothers who died, the youngest and the one after Javed. And yeah, so we grew up as a very happy, big family, and Javed being the eldest, we all sort of ran around him a lot. And as we grew up, actually, we realized how much actually he shared with us in terms of whatever clarifications we would have liked. And I think because of my parents' relationship, where my father was a professor and my mother was a political activist, plus she was also a local magistrate. She was socially and politically very active. So both of them were busy. And I think we grew up in an environment where these things came pretty much as a norm. For instance, an egalitarian society, equal relationships, no hierarchy. So that is the environment we grew in. And Javed, of course, played also a very major role. And when he left for Delhi to do his PhD, until then he was at home. And some of my memories go back to the time when all of us brothers and sisters had to do housework. And Javed also had his task cut out for him. So I remember him always with a bag on to go and do vegetables and mutton or whatever for the house, while my other brothers would do other things. And these were some of the very nice, and we were a big family with cousins and everybody. He was not very religious, but yes, he taught us to perform namaz, because he used to actually be pretty regular in that. And we also belong to a family where we have a priest, a murshid as we call, and we are the murids. And Javed was very regular. All of us, in fact, used to visit the mosque there, because it's our first cousin who happened to be the priest. His father used to be then. Now it's his son and the younger son. So we all used to visit and come back, and their children, all of us, grew up in many ways together. And Javed was very close. And in fact, the one who became the priest after his father passed away was Javed's college mate. And he was doing engineering then, and Javed was doing his college in Nizam College. And then he became a priest, and Javed actually was pretty much, I think, influenced them. But I think gradually Javed became also very politically aware, and as he began to move away from Hyderabad, and I think to the extent that he was one of the most radical by the time we met him, as you know, after I also moved to Delhi in 1970. And it was around the 80s when emergency happened. That was a turning point for many of us, because it came right to our door, because my father was hounded during emergency and he lost his job, and it was a huge struggle. And that was really, in terms of a political molding also, I think emergency set it off for many of us, you know, also because, not just because it was a personal thing, but also because the conditions it created both in all over the country. I was in Delhi then, so was Javed. And Javed had married by then. He married in 1970. Yeah, I married in 1972. So many of us began to leave Hyderabad. And yeah, Javed, I remember going, and I was still in Hyderabad at that time when he moved to Sapru House, and I wasn't yet in Delhi. Yeah. So I used to take holidays and come and stay with Javed, and once he met Jayanti, I would stay in her room with her, and Javed, Jayanti and me and any one of us who came would have a great time with him. And I remember chasing him for 5-star chocolates which he would buy for me. I was 16 then maybe. He was very affectionate as a brother, always, even now, and he loves to hug us and talk to us. And after my father and then my mother also passed away, actually he became pretty much the center for the family. So whenever we go, that is where we first arrived, at his house. And in Delhi, I think I met a lot of interesting people through Javed, you know, at that young age, because he had this whole mix of very interesting friends that he had. And I'm not remembering all the names now at that time. And it was really a very good time, and it introduced me also, because he had begun to do PhD, to very new ideas, and I was following what he was doing and things, but I was still very young. But at an impressionable age, I think he played a very major role for us. I think during this whole period when he and Jayanti married, and the kind of situation it created, I think that made us aware of the first, because that time it was called Jan Sangh, which is now BJP. So I think the right-wing politics, I think how progressive we were, and some of the things that were betrayed in such a big manner in a society where we, like I said, the way we had grown up, and it was completely normal for the family, or not out of the blue, that somebody is marrying a Hindu girl, but the way it became nasty, and the way they were hounded. I remember walking with them once, and there were these people stalking on the streets of Delhi. So it was very unsafe, and they were, I remember till today, I think I still have some newspaper cuttings where he was also charged for having abducted a Hindu girl. So it became a very communal issue, and which shocked us all very greatly. But Javed and Jayanti both were very brave during that period, and I think because of the kind of, also he had joined Salwan College, or I think that is what it was called then. Okay. He was teaching there, and because of the kind of teacher he is and has been always, the kind of support he received from the students, it became a huge national issue actually, to the point that it went to Parliament. And when they debarred him from coming to college, the students would be hanging out at the gate waiting for Javed just to come, and they said, we are going to risk our lives to ever, but we are not going to let them, you know, discharge you from your duties in this manner just because you have married. And they had crazy charges about how he was teaching students. He would come without an undershirt, and he would smoke outside the classroom. So at one level it was very petty. On the other hand, I think they were raising some very fundamental issues which were very wrong at that time. So we got a taste of right-wing politics then, and I think Javed was slowly also moving towards the left politics already, and so was I, slowly coming into that. So because I think that was the period when there was a political churning taking place also. Emergency came much later, but when they married already, I think Jan Sangh was establishing itself at a national level by communalizing issues. And I don't think it was such a big deal about so many of these marriages, intercaste, interreligious, had taken place earlier. And I remember in our family, my parents actually performing the little thing for couples who had come to take shelter in our house because the parents didn't agree or whatever. So we were pretty familiar with this whole thing of intercaste, interreligious marriages. But I think that is when Jan Sangh was raising its ugly head, and that is how the atmosphere was very vitiated. And they just took upon this because this was a Delhi girl, a Bengali Hindu girl, and Javeed Alam, a Muslim. So I think it was just being made into something which turned out to be very murky. And it went on for a couple of years, 3 years. It just went on until it went to Parliament, from where the order came that he should be immediately reinstated with retrospective effect. And once he was reinstated, he resigned from that job. That is when he left for Himachal and joined the Himachal University. And Jayanti also moved there. Salwan College, affiliated to Delhi University, but it was a small college. It wasn't something so big, and Javed had just begun teaching, so it wasn't even as though he was in the limelight or as well known as he is today as a scholar. It wasn't like that. I think it was only because Jan Sangh at that time used to make rounds of all these courts where you apply for registration of marriage, and they would always make out that practice continues till today. If there is a Muslim marrying a Hindu girl, or if there's a Hindu man marrying a Muslim. So if it's a Muslim girl marrying a Hindu, they didn't bother so much because then she would be converted to Hinduism is what they thought. But in this case, I think they just picked out, and this was the most glaring because here's a teacher, lecturer, and here is a girl. And because he had traveled back and forth to Calcutta, and finally this marriage happened, it was a big affair in Calcutta where the marriage took place actually. And they were asking that to prove the marriage. They said, give us photographs to prove that you are married. Because throughout that campaign, what they kept saying is that Javed abducted this girl against her wishes and forcibly kept her with him. And then when he just said, I don't even, and I still remember Javed's stand during that period, he said, I do not need to defend myself. This is my personal life. Nobody need question me. Yeah, he took a very tough stand. And he said, I'm not going to prove anything. And then they said, no, if you really want to tell us that you're married, show us the marriage certificate, show us your photographs from the wedding. He said, I refuse to. And many people at that time told him, why do you want to snowball it into a big controversy? Just show them the photo. He said, how dare they intervene or interfere in my personal life? And her parents haven't raised the issue. If she were abducted, her parents would be the first one to file a report against, But none of that happened. So they were out, and he understood immediately that how they were trying to communalize the issue, and he wasn't going to play the game according to their. So he took a very tough stand, and later when he was in this college during that time, his students actually were a huge support for him. And then he received support from different quarters, whether these were scholars, teachers, students, ordinary people. Because the atmosphere was they were trying to vitiate it so badly. But then he also said, I'm not going to I'm not going to just hide myself and sit at home. They would go out for their walk, they would do everything that they normally did, although they were warned, there were threats to their life, and anyone could do anything at that time. And he realized that there was danger lurking all the time. But then I think they fought it very well, and after all, Parliament also, it came into that thing. And he didn't have to show the photographs, he didn't produce any certificate, and they won the battle. Yeah, they did. They were out on the streets, they were at the gates, and he was welcomed like a hero. After the order came that he should be reinstated, lot of students, when Jayanti was there, all these students who had been supporting him all through, and they were struggling on his behalf, they were all there, and they just picked him up, and then they opened the gates and took him. But the first thing he did was, actually, after meeting everybody, he tendered his resignation. He said, this is not the place I want to work. He resigned from Salwan College. But I think he did the right thing, because a college which actually humiliates you in this manner, a college which suspends you without any solid ground, he's not going to teach there. And knowing Javed, I think that was the correct position he took, and he would not have liked to be told, the way they were behaving, it was a defeat for the college, but he didn't want to also, victory is, okay, I've come back, but I'm not going to stay on here. During that period, I don't really remember if he was in a movement. It was, I think, towards late 70s and or maybe in the 70s that he became closer to the CPIN. And we used to have a lot of discussions, and I think it was very logical, it seemed to me, because he was already getting pretty radicalized, and just as I told you about the way we had grown up and what our parents had set for us also, I think everything influenced us in a manner where politically also he was pretty conscious, and that is how he moved. And once he joined Himachal University, he was actually an active member of CPM at that time, and he joined Himachal University as a lecturer. But everyone gives him credit for one fact, that Himachal University single-handedly he established the CPIM there. The whole unit that began from there in Himachal Pradesh. He was in Simla at the college, university, but slowly through students and then worker struggles, whether it's a little Mali who's having a problem at Institute of Advanced Studies, he took positions very clearly, and he was always with the oppressed, he was with the young, he was with people who were struggling, and that is how I think he became very active in politics. And there was this famous worker strike where Javeed actually was very, very much part of it, and it went on for, I think, about 10 days, where they would collect rations and provide for the workers until this was about wages. And actually it became a successful strike because the demands were met, and he became very, very politically involved during that period. I think once he was in Himachal, and we all used to be waiting कि now Javeed will begin to write, because his PhD was brilliant. He was always, from school till college till university, always stood first and merit and won awards because he was a very, very bright student as young and even later. And I think once he started teaching in Himachal, and that is when, and his PhD was complete and everything, that is when he started writing. I remember one of his first articles, I think, appeared when he was at Himachal University, if I'm not mistaken. After that, he became a very prolific writer. Subaltern studies. Yeah, Javeed became pretty much a part of, I think, for some time. So all these people, Gyanendra Pandey, and they were close friends also, Javeed and him, and Partha Chatterjee. Then later, I think, because of teaching and also being in the party, Prabhat Patnaik is very on good terms with. They are in fact good friends. So there are many such people actually. Yeah, certainly. I have gained a lot from his politics and his political understanding, because I'm also a member of the CPIM, and I joined, I think, in early 80s. Since then I have been. And Javeed is somebody, because none of my other brothers were politically that inclined, nor is my sister. So Javeed and I share a certain political, what should I say, experience and our own activism. And Javeed I always turn to for clarifications of any doubts, and lot of discussions, and whatever activity that I was involved in as a party member. I'm also an active member of ADWA, All India Democratic Women's Association. So that way I think Javeed in fact played a very good role in. He's not a very dogmatic party member, and I think his critical thinking, and I think the questions he raises, and I think his understanding of the political situation or the current political scenario and everything, and where we stand as a left party, I think his understanding is excellent, and I think his contribution would have been greater had he been, sometimes it's recognized, sometimes it's not really given its due. So there are some people like Rajan, who's been slogging for years now, and he's a great party member and with a great understanding. So is Javed actually. Himachal, I don't know how many people recognize, but we know that Javeed played an instrumental role in building up CPIM through student politics or to worker struggles, but slowly he left an imprint. And in fact, as an organized endeavor to bring people together or workers together. And I was very, very inspired also. I don't know if they recognize as many of us do, because in CPIM or left politics, it's not so much about individuals, So if there is a movement, of course, people play a certain role in building that movement. So similarly, I don't think anybody is really projected as the person, the individual. So it's basically more importance and significance is given to the development of that movement, where it leads you. Yeah. ICSR chairperson, I used to meet him those 3 years that he was quite often in Delhi. And I spent a good time with him, and I met people where he had organized conferences, and the way he tried to, because we had long discussions over how he would now look at it, ICSR research particularly. And I remember him telling me that he really wants to make it much wider, and he wanted also to include a lot of Dalit studies, Dalit scholars, and women, particularly, women doing research, and to bring in a different sort of light on the kind of research that has been, and to make it more extensive in the sense that it doesn't just become, unruly, but at the same time very focused. So the committees he formed, and the people I met where he had organized conferences, and I think he enjoyed that role, and he was politically and in terms of research very, very sharp, particularly to do with women's studies also, how he tried to bring that into the ICSR thing, although ICSR used to actually do very focused studies also earlier. Yeah, Seiful, actually I visited him, but I didn't have much at that time. I mean, I met his friends from his colleagues and stuff, but I think it was a much quieter period for him in Seaful compared to Himachal, compared to Delhi, compared to being in ICSR as a director or chairperson. I think Seaful was a bit quieter for him. Actually, I don't care too much about whether society would recognize him or not, because you know that is the tragedy, because a lot of good work, a lot of good people, a lot of ideas society may not even consider as something very special or contributing to society itself. But I know, and many people who've known Javed, and Javed, he's touched so many people's lives while he's sitting there turning 70, and you know, I think that matters much more, because, and the fact that you want to do a little biography of Javed, it must have moved you also as a person, the whole idea to do a biography on him. So I think these gestures to me are more important than whether society formally actually recognizes his contribution or not. But I think whatever he's written so far has meant quite a lot in scholarly terms as well as political and social understanding of our society itself.